Welcome back to Now and Then, the podcast where we talk about what's happening in the natural, organic, and wellness industry right now and what it means coming up next. I'm Lynsey Walker, VP of Marketing and Communications.
And I'm Ashley Cornell, Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy. And this is our February episode where we'll be recapping our first CHFA Now show of the year. So that's our CHFA Now Vancouver, which took place last weekend, actually. And I guess we should just start reminiscing right away.
Oh my God, let's do it. It was so much fun. It was incredible. From the moment the doors opened, you could really feel the excitement and the momentum. We're waiting for the final numbers, but I think we had more than 8,000 industry professionals there. So retailers, distributors, brands, emerging founders, established brands, just so much fun.
It sounds amazing. I didn't get a chance to make it this show, but what were the biggest takeaways from the show that you saw on the show floor?
Yeah, I will say you were missed at the show for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love talking takeaways. So I think one of my favorite presentations that we do at the show is our Saturday morning retailer breakfast. And this year we really wanted to take a step back from just reporting on like what's trending and really help retailers better understand the consumer mindset and what's driving purchase decisions in 2026.
And how do you go about doing that?
Yes, we actually started by, like I said, really taking a step back and looking at the macro forces that are shaping our industry. And there are two big ones, and I think we actually maybe alluded to one at the in the last episode. But the first one being wellness fatigue, and the second one being economic pressures.
Yes, I do remember the term wellness fatigue, and it sounded like some bad news for our industry, but I know we kind of talked about that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does sound like bad news, but it's not at all. I mean, I think the good news, and we can see this through a lot of the different studies that we report on, is, wellness means more to more of us than ever, which is a really good thing for our industry. But not everybody is reacting the same way. I think we're really collectively bombarded with information right now. If I go on my social media, it's like what to eat, what not to eat, what to take. Should you cold plunge as a woman? Should you not? Like it's overwhelming, and I think it really causes people to almost disengage in a way. And so really, what this is leading to is this need for simplification and curation. Really just make it simple for consumers. And I have a good example, actually. I thought about this at the show. So can I tell you, maybe give you an example
sure.
of what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as you know, there's someone on our team who is about to become a mom for the first time. And her and I were discussing trends leading up to the show. And she disclosed to me just the amount of information that she was getting as someone who was about to give birth was just overwhelming. It was so much. And so eventually she really just gave up and just chose a product that was bundled. So everything that she should take in a day, like just give me exactly what I need to take so I don't have to think about it. And that's an example of this kind of mentality that consumers are having. And so I think things like bundling or really highly curated edits on products or even really simplified products are going to be what consumers gravitate to in 2026 for brands. Like literally spell out what you're about, what the ingredients are, and why they're there.
That's interesting, and an interesting example as well. So the other thing we've been talking about a lot is economic fatigue. So how is that shaping our decisions?
Yeah, we've been talking about this one for a couple of years now. But as we go into 2026, actually what we're seeing is that cost of living is starting to impact people even at higher income levels. The good news is that consumers, at least from what we're seeing in our studies, that consumers are willing to pay more when they see value. And actually the consumer research that we presented at the show, we asked consumers about the moment of truth. So if you're standing at a shelf and you have to pick between product A and product B, what's going to sway you to choose either of the products? And what's really interesting is that product quality and product efficacy outranked price. I think we've all maybe felt burned a little bit in the last year of maybe paying for something that we didn't use. And I think, again, this makes a lot of sense in a world where there's over-consumerism. We really want to make sure that the products we invest in are going to work for us and fit within our lifestyle.
For sure. I guess, can you give me a little bit more information on what you mean by by that specifically?
Yeah, I think maybe to illustrate it, like I'll use formats as an example. And when I was at the show, I was speaking to someone and they were talking to me about how much they love their morning smoothie. You know, they look forward to it, it's their morning ritual. And when they make their smoothie, they add all of their powders to it. And so it just feels like it really sets them up right for the day. And for them, powder formats are great. They already fit into an established routine. But for me, I almost never drink a smoothie. I think I broke my blender like 2 years ago and I haven't replaced it. So while I don't mind a powder, it feels like one more thing that I have to fit into my day. It's not naturally part of that routine. And so that's where we're starting to see these macro forces come together. You know, people want something that's simple, that works for their lifestyle, and they want something that's not just going to sit in their shelf and kind of remind them of this one more thing that they have to do. It really needs to integrate into what they're already doing. And so that's where I think for retailers, it's really about asking the right questions when when a customer comes into the store to really help build that value equation for them and keep them coming back.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. And, on consumer mindset, I think we could probably talk about it for a full episode, but I know we have quite a few topics to get through. So I do want to quickly switch gears and ask about Launchpad. I didn't see it this time around. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure all of our listeners would love to hear it as well.
For sure. I know there's so much that happens at the show, honestly. I don't think we would get through an episode in any reasonable amount of time. Like, how do people feel about 5-hour episodes? That's what we could fill. But back to Launchpad, watching the 8 finalists, honestly, it was so amazing. And it's such a reminder of the entrepreneurial strength that lives within this sector. And Fromage Protein Pops, they were the winner. And when it was announced, you could really feel people react. And I think it really captured where we are right now. Indulgence meets functionality. You know, it's a protein forward product, lower sugar, no artificial shortcuts.
That does feel a bit symbolic towards like a broader shift, performance without necessarily sacrificing on the experience you get when you eat food.
Totally. And I don't want to spend too much time on the trends because like you said, we have a lot to cover, but it was definitely another trend that we were seeing on the show floor. Again, wellness means more and more to more Canadians, and we're really looking to it when we want to reward ourselves or treat ourselves. And so we're really looking to brands and products that we can maybe turn to after we've had a hard day, or ways that we can celebrate life naturally. And so really products that focus on experience over function, that have that indulgent or sensorial quality, or can act as a way to bring some joy to the everyday, I think are definitely an area of interest for consumers. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see where Fromage goes from here. And I hope they have a ton of success. Okay. But like I said, I can't focus everything on the show. So I do want to shift gears because I know there's been a lot happening in your world. And so I'm going to hand it over to you. From a regulatory perspective, where do we want to start?
Sure. I guess let's start at the larger picture. We've started to hear some rumblings from government about organizational changes, and Health Canada has informed us that it will be making some changes to its Food and Nutrition Directorate, and this is part of the federal government's kind of comprehensive expenditure review under the 2025 budget. So the department will be streamlining operations. It will be kind of reducing duplication and refocusing on what's considered its core mandate. So some scaling back of some food and nutrition research is one example.
So does that mean less research and less support?
Where they have indicated that they would be scaling back on research is where I guess areas of evidence already exist outside of government, and where that evidence is already well established or available elsewhere. I guess it should be noted that, while changes are being made within the department, they have committed to maintaining capacity for all key food safety and nutrition priorities, just kind of while they're throughout this transition period. And the department has also indicated it intends to maintain services in all priority areas. So yet to find out more about what that means exactly, but that's what we've heard so far.
And so are there any other impacts that we can anticipate as part of these changes? Like, will they be narrowing the focus on the healthy eating policy and promotion work, or just dietary guidance like Canada's food guide?
Yeah, so they'll be narrowing the focus on the healthy eating policy and promotion. And what they'll be doing is, instead of like a larger view, they will be focusing specifically on like dietary guidance as their area of focus. So using Health Canada's food guide as as a guide for their policy.
Okay, and I think we can include a link to the director's letter in the show notes.
Yeah.
And another thing I know that you've been working on that I hope you can kind of give an update on is around movement on the Canada or Canadian organic standards. So what's been happening on that side of things?
Yeah, so it was the 2025 review of the organic standards, and it, again, as a reminder, it was led by the Canadian General Standards Board, or otherwise known as the CGSB. So it's reached its final stages, and the standards have been adopted by the CGSB Technical Committee. So very close. Publication is targeted for March 2026.
Spring is almost here. And I know we've played an active role in this process, sitting on that technical committee to ensure the standards reflect the needs of the organic sector.
Yes, that's correct. So it was great to be a part of the CGSB Technical Committee. However, following some announcements to do with the federal budget, the CGSB is expected to actually wind down operations. So that means the organic standards will need to find a new institutional home after the publication. So we expect some transition planning to follow, after the spring 2026 or after the publication of the standards. So we'll continue to monitor any developments and keep our members informed as we hear more.
And I think, if I'm correct, that CGSB transition will also have implications beyond organic, specifically for non-GE labeling as well, correct?
Yes. So the dissolution of the CGSB will impact the standard or the voluntary standard for labeling of genetically engineered and non-genetically engineered foods. So there was actually an update that the CGSB committee, which I was also sitting on, was planning, and there was a publication that was targeted for spring 2026. At this point, we have not received confirmation on whether the announcement of the budget changes and the dissolution of the CGSB will affect that timeline or not. So something else that we're watching out for, and we'll keep everyone informed.
Amazing. There's also an important CFIA labeling update as well, correct?
Yep, lots going on. So this is a bit different outside of the CGSB that we were just talking about, but CFIA has amended the common name for ingredients and components document. So this is a document incorporated by reference in the Food and Drug Regulations, and specifically the part that's been amended is with regards to modified milk ingredients.
What are modified milk ingredients and what food? Tell the regular non-regulatory person, what are they and what products are they found in?
Sure. So modified milk ingredients is a term that's been used to group things like whey and casein and milk protein concentrates and isolates. It's just a grouping on ingredient lines. Instead of calling out each thing individually, a number of different types of modified milk ingredients are used. They're grouped together and termed modified milk ingredients. So they're often found in things like dairy, desserts, yogurts, processed cheese, kind of milk-based beverages or creamers. Modified milk ingredients are less expensive to use. They're less expensive alternatives than using actual milk. They're more shelf stable. So there are a number of reasons why these would be used in place of milk. They can help with texture of a dairy-based product, especially when, the percent of milk that's being used in the product is being reduced. Many areas used within dairy products, but outside of the dairy sector, they're also used in a large range of products. So modified milk ingredients are used in seasonings and flavor mixtures and sauces and like protein bars or snack bars and bakery products. They're found in so many different things. Depending on the product, most of those often declare those ingredients as modified milk ingredients on the package. And they're found in a lot of those types of products because it's not always practical to put fluid milk in those types of products, right?
More than I thought, to be honest, when you said it. And so the use of modified milk ingredients, if I'm understanding correctly, it allows companies to reduce the amount of milk that they're using in a dairy-based product to reduce costs, number one, and then also increase stability.
Yes. So for dairy sector, that's exactly what it does. And that's fine. It's fine to want to reduce costs and increase stability. However, modified milk ingredients, they don't sound natural.
Like
right?
the term.
If you think of the term modified milk ingredients, it doesn't sound all that natural.
Yeah.
So for dairy companies that are increasingly turning to use modified milk ingredients, and I could go off on a tangent about that and the reasons and why. It has to do with like renegotiations of NAFTA in Trump's first term. But we're seeing increasing modified milk ingredients being increasingly used in dairy products in Canada. And for these products or these companies that sell these products, it's a bit of a PR problem that needs solving, because modified milk ingredients, again, don't sound all that natural. So the request actually to change the name from modified milk ingredients to something else was the request of industry. And it's no longer using modified milk ingredients, they're replacing it with another term that sounds more natural.
Okay, what sounds more natural?
So,
I'm curious. Tell me. I'm sure the regulatory people have an answer for this.
Maybe I'm a bit cynical when it comes to this conversation, to be honest. But the reason that was given for changing the term was because it was not informative, right? A lot of consumers, and I can agree, it's not a very informative term, right? Modified milk ingredients doesn't tell the consumer. However, the alternative is milk-derived ingredients, which I don't think is all that more informative to the consumer. It is another term that is just grouping these a number of different milk modified type ingredients together. So the reason that's being given is because it is more informative to the consumer. However, it's just another grouping of another term, and it, I think, sounds a little bit more natural. So using the term modified is no longer, a PR problem, but it's also problematic from a labeling perspective, because modified is actually used on a number of different occasions, not just milk ingredients. So it's consistent with how other ingredient categories are named, such as modified starches or modified plant proteins. So this change actually introduces inconsistency in ingredient naming, which I think is actually further contributing to consumer confusion.
Yeah. It doesn't, again, being an outsider looking in, it doesn't sound that much clearer. But again, I'm not the expert in this, but I guess what I'm hearing you say is that label changes are coming.
Yeah. So, I mean, the new term, I guess, is more palatable. I don't know if it's more informative, but it's more palatable for consumers to hear milk-derived ingredients. It sounds a little bit more closely akin to milk than modified milk ingredients. And that's all well and good. And it does kind of, seems harmless. Okay, well, what's the big deal? The new term is technically accurate. However, what it means is that all products that have declared modified milk ingredients on their labels, even if it's in a small proportion in their product, will now have to make costly label changes, right? So it's impacting a number of different industries to go from something on an ingredient line that says modified milk ingredients to saying milk-derived ingredients. I don't know if it's actually adding all that much consumer clarity for the cost of what it's going to be to update these labels for all of these other products that aren't getting that PR.
Yeah.
Benefit.
Someone who's worked on label changes, it's a lot of work. It's a
lot of work, and it's very expensive, and it's very expensive for an industry that has just gone through labeling changes for front of pack, for example.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I guess, when are these changes coming though? Like, how quickly do brands need to respond? Because like you said, we did just go through front of pack.
Yeah, so industry will need to have their product labels updated by January 1st, 2030. So there is about a 4-year transition period. And I would say all those that are potentially impacted to consult the CFA's notice to industry for details on the change. I know it seems like it's a while away, but it does creep up fast. And we saw it happen to many brands with FOP labeling requirements. So check now and put a plan in place so that you can have these updates alongside other planned labeling updates you may have planned for branding or other things on the label, etc. So I think I would advise our members in the industry to just, unless you're a vegan certified brand, it doesn't have milk, I would make sure that you're doing the checks on your products as soon as possible.
Yeah, it does seem far in the future, but we saw it in front of pack, how quickly it creeps up, and you don't want to be scrambling last minute. Okay, how about this for a segue? There's another file that has been, I feel like, in the works for a very long time, which is the cannabis health products. I think you have some updates there.
Yes, I do. So After nearly a year after the consultation closed, the NNHPD released its What We Heard report for the consultation towards a pathway for health products containing CBD.
And I think you've mentioned this in past episodes, but can you remind people who don't know, again, people like me, what is a What We Heard report?
Sure, certainly. A What We Heard report is a summary of comments that the government received from stakeholders and the general public during their consultation on any given topic. So in this case, the topic was about a regulatory pathway in Canada for natural health products containing CBD.
So it seems like a long time to get a summary in place. What is it that they heard? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, there was a lot of support for a regulatory pathway, and the report did go into detail on the feedback that they received for some of the proposed elements of the regulatory pathway. However, cannabis health products as a new category has actually been removed from NNHPD's forward regulatory plan in favor of other priorities. It's consistent with messaging that has been sent. It's consistent with the fact that it took a year to get out that summary. So it is being deprioritized, but it doesn't come as a surprise, unfortunately. And it is nonetheless disappointing. The file has been on the department's plan since 2019. So,
Yeah.
we've now gone 6 years without a draft regulation in place. All the while it was on their plan during that period. So that is another solid overview of some of the regulatory and policy topics of the month. If you're a CHFA member and want to learn more on these topics or other regulatory updates from the past month, watch your inboxes for our CHFA regulatory report.
Awesome. Okay, so a lot of regulatory stuff. Even after an incredible Vancouver show, we're not slowing down. I just want to call it a couple more events that we have as well. So we have our CHFA Industry Night Out in Calgary, which is coming up on April 8th. I think that is crazy because I've been so focused on February that it's going to be March soon, and then it's going to be April. So it's like a month away, which is nuts. And then really exciting, at the end of April, we're actually hosting our very first ever Industry Night Out in Halifax. So we'll be headed to the East Coast. Then we have our Ottawa Regulatory Forum, which takes place in Ottawa on May 26th and 27th. And then coming up really, really quick, our CHFA Now Toronto show, which is at the end of September. So that's going to be September 25th to 27th. So lots of opportunities to connect as an industry, connect with our team, collaborate. Always here to ask questions or answer questions and give more updates as things emerge. So yeah, lots of ways to connect with the industry.
And as always, we'll continue bringing you the policy updates, the context, and what it all means for your business.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ashley. I appreciate all those rundowns. There's a lot happening. Like I said, I could have focused just this whole episode on the show, but it was really important to get all of those updates. And so thanks, everyone, for listening to Now and Then. I think it's, again, amazing first show after Vancouver. We're just going to keep carrying the energy forward all year long. Lots of things happening. So don't forget to like, subscribe, send us a comment, send us a question, and thanks everyone for listening. Take care.